following program is sponsored by CBN.
Today, from a dealer
We began selling cocaine for him. They're in middle school.
to an addict,
My profits and a lot of my money was going into my addiction at this point in my life.
and that wasn't his only vice.
I have to get violent to protect myself.
So how was he able to go in front of a judge
I had another violation in a different county.
and beat the rap
I promise you I'll give you my life.
on today's 700 Club?
Welcome to the 700 Club. I'll start this program with the words of Jesus. Fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, because the news we've got today is enough to make everybody terrified. 1,000 deaths in a single day, and the worst is yet to come. President Trump is warning the nation that horrific days lie ahead, including an economic impact that could be catastrophic. Whew, not my words. What does the new evidence show about the spread of the coronavirus? CBN's Jenna Browder reports from Washington.
With now more than 216,000 cases and over 5,100 deaths, President Trump says the worst is probably still ahead.
Difficult days are ahead for our nation. We're going to have a couple of weeks, starting pretty much now, but especially a few days from now, that are going to be horrific.
And unfortunately, more bad news. The federal government has nearly depleted its emergency stockpile of protective medical supplies like masks, gowns, and gloves.
It is, because we're sending it directly to hospitals. We don't want it to come to the stockpile, because then we have to take it.
Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi have joined at least 42 other states ordering residents to stay home. But the president is not yet ready to issue similar nationwide restrictions.
There are some states that don't have much of a problem.
There were more than 1,000 coronavirus deaths in a single day Wednesday, more than double that of the flu. The city of Los Angeles is now recommending citizens wear masks in public. New York City's death toll is past 1,300 and climbing as the peak is still weeks away. A video tour of New York's Mount Sinai Queens Hospital showed the hallways lined with new patients.
All these patients here sitting out in the hallways because we are full.
Vice President Mike Pence says he expects the worst of the pandemic will be over by Memorial Day, still almost 2 months away. On the economic front, a huge jump in new unemployment claims is expected to be announced today. More than 285 million Americans live in states where stay-at-home orders are in place. Officials say even with social distancing guidelines in place, up to 250,000 Americans could die from the pandemic, but stress that those numbers can come down the more people comply with orders to stay inside and limit contact. Dr. Anthony Fauci was asked how long social distancing could last.
When it goes down to essentially no new cases, no deaths at a period of time.
And more evidence is emerging that coronavirus infections are being spread by people who have no clear symptoms. The CDC now says anyone exposed to the disease may be a carrier, whether that person has symptoms or not.
So we just need to pretend like everybody has it. That's the best thing to do. So keep that 6-foot distance.
Doctors say it takes an average of 5 days from point of being infected to when they start showing symptoms. But some people never have symptoms. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
What Jenna is saying is why I believe I agree with the health minister of China, who said everybody should wear a mask. Everybody, just breathing. You don't have to cough. All you have to do is breathe. And you may be a carrier and you don't know it. I think it should be mandatory that every human being in the United States wears a mask. You don't have to have one of those fancy jobs, but all you need is a cloth covering. But it's not to keep you from getting it, it's to keep you from giving it to somebody else and spreading it all over the country. So I don't know why the CDC is waiting to put that in effect, but it needs to be done immediately. Well, a staggering new number of jobless claims today. 6.6 million new claims in one day. That's double the previous record set just last week. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, It looks for all the world like the cure is worse than the disease. What's happening to our economy is just absolutely staggering. But think of that, 6.6 million unemployment claims in 1 week. Well, in other news, the U.S. Navy is taking action to prevent an epidemic on one of its carriers. Ephraim Graham has that.
Pat, the U.S. Navy says it's taking nearly 3,000 sailors off the USS Roosevelt to protect them from the coronavirus. Fewer than 100 of the 5,000 service members assigned to the aircraft carrier tested positive for the virus. The captain issued a letter earlier this week asking the Navy to evacuate personnel for their safety. The ship is docked in Guam. The Navy says it's leaving some crew on board to monitor the nuclear reactor and to guard the weapons. A growing number of states have banned elective surgeries in order to focus on all resources fighting the COVID-19 virus. But some argue women should still be able to get an abortion. They say it's, quote, an essential procedure. That has some states fighting it out in the courts. Here's Paul Strand with more.
An interesting side effect of this pandemic is what it's done to the war over abortion. The president's task force has asked states to ban elective surgeries for now. That's to help deal with the sudden emergency shortage of personal protective equipment so necessary to guard the lives of those fighting this virus. But some abortion providers have been unwilling to go along, and that's led some states to ban abortion itself. And on the flip side, other states to specifically say it's essential.
The topic came up at one of the task force briefings.
Do you agree with states who are placing coronavirus victims above elective abortions, and should more states be doing the same?
Well, I think what we're doing is we're trying to, as a group, governors, and that's Republicans and Democrats, we're just working together to solve this problem. That's been what you're mentioning has been going on for a long time, and it's a sad event, a lot of sad events in this country.
New Jersey, Massachusetts, Virginia, and Washington state governors have all decreed abortion is an essential need, exempting it from any ban.
We know that abortion is essential health care. It is a procedure where time is of the essence.
Pro-life advocate Mallory Quigley questions the decision and points to the politics of abortion.
They've just put such an emphasis on the taking of an unborn human life, and I think it speaks to the stranglehold that the pro-abortion lobby has on so many in our nation's governments across the country.
But Texas, Ohio, Mississippi, Maryland, and Louisiana are insisting abortions stop in their states, so clinics' medical gear could instead go to fighting the pandemic. But that has led to a reaction of outrage. One activist tweeted, "Needing an abortion is time-sensitive and very essential to a person who needs one." Pro-life bioethicist Charles Camosi tells CBN News he's been watching this all unfold.
Even people who are going to die without a transplant, like a liver transplant, those liver transplants are being put on hold because they're not considered essential surgeries. How in anybody's right mind elective abortion could be in a different category? This beggars belief.
Some abortion clinic supporters go as far as to suggest this is all a plot. One saying the anti-abortion movement is using a public health crisis to essentially ban abortion. Another tweeted, even in a national crisis, they don't stop their relentless assaults on women and pregnant people.
I think that this is just classic abortion lobby anger and fear lashing out at those who want to protect life.
What's still to be seen is how far a state's actually willing to go to stop abortions, where providers have been unwilling to comply with the ban. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
It's shocking to me to think that abortion is considered an essential proceeding and will take the necessary hospital space, nurses, doctors, masks, and all the other equipment needed, and yet they'll defer a liver transplant, which may be necessary to keep somebody alive. You told me that you might not be able to go to your dentist, but you could get an abortion.
Yeah, well, right now, I think most offices, unless it's an emergency, are closed. But at the time that we were talking about that, anybody who wanted to could walk in and get an abortion. It's odd because the very thing they're claiming about this is exactly what they're doing. You know, they're saying we are special, we deserve something over and above. Abortion is a choice. You know, that's what they use, that word, choice. Yeah. So that kind of negates the essential.
It's shocking to me that would go ahead of a life changing liver transplant that was needed to keep somebody from dying. Yeah. And yet here in Virginia, I'm a resident. I was born in this state. I'm so ashamed of what goes on in Richmond. In Richmond, the governor, who himself was, I think, a pediatrician, graduate of Eastern Virginia Medical School, wants to put down and say abortion is an essential procedure. You've got to put it at the head of the line. Shocking. Ephraim.
Pat, more than 1 million N95 masks are coming to the U.S. from China today, courtesy of the NFL's New England Patriots. Workers loaded the boxes onto a team plane at Shenzhen Airport, and it left in the early hours this morning, headed for Boston's Logan Airport. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker struck a deal with China for the masks 2 weeks ago, but needed a way to get them here. Jonathan Kraft, who is president of the Patriots and chairman of the board for Massachusetts General Hospital, told the governor he had something that just might help, that great big plane. As we enter some dark days, we're reminded there are stories of hope and survival, like the 90-year-old grandmother who contracted COVID-19 in that Washington State nursing home and now testifies God gave her the strength to beat the virus. Caitlin Burke brings us a story.
This suburban nursing home in Kirkland, Washington, made headlines as the center of the country's first deadly outbreak of COVID-19. Since the first positive test at the Life Care Center on February 28th, the virus spread to nearly 2/3 of its population. Geneva Wood spent much of the winter there, recovering from a stroke. Just days before she was supposed to go home, COVID-19 put the facility on lockdown. 3 days later, Wood spiked a fever.
I didn't know that I had the virus until I had the virus. I had no sense of it before.
While other news outlets have talked about the 90-year-old's love for her family, spunky spirit, and the amazing fight she put up, Wood says it's her faith that is the most important part of this story.
Hadn't it been my faith in God and my family and their prayers and all of their families and the church and everything, and just the faith and prayers pull me through.
Largely kept in isolation, Wood says God was her only companion. She specifically remembers one night when she wasn't sure if she would survive until morning.
I could feel God's presence. His hands were on my body, and I could feel his presence that I wake up and I could feel these hands. And I went back to sleep. And through the night, as I wake up, I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his hands. And I knew he was with me. And I made it through the night until you felt the God's presence and his hands on you. It's something else. And if it hadn't have been for him, I couldn't have done it. And I wasn't alone because he was with me all the time.
Wood also remembers one special doctor. He brought her a Bible and spent time each day reading her favorite scriptures.
At first off, I said Psalms 23, but he would read to me every morning.
Wood's family calls her recovery miraculous. 19 days after entering the hospital, she was sent home, coronavirus-free. Now she has some advice for everyone else battling the virus.
Don't give up hope. God is always there. And put your trust in him and lean on him and give your life to him, and you'll make it. But you got to not give up hope and fight.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Put your trust in him and do not give up hope. Pat?
I want to repeat that scripture that I started the program with. It's Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Fear not, for I am with you. I know there's a lot of fear in the world. Don't be afraid. We have that dear lady in out in the state of Washington, recovering from that stuff because God touched her. Terry?
Well, coming up, inside the largest bailout in American history, a $2 trillion lifeline for the economy. How much of a slice will you be getting? And what does it mean for your taxes? Stay tuned for those answers. And then, robbed at gunpoint twice. What was his plan to fight back? You'll see later on today's show.
Well, usually by the beginning of this month, we're talking about filing our tax returns. April 15th deadline. But because of the coronavirus, that deadline has been extended. Join us to talk about what this may mean to you is tax expert Dan Pilla. Dan, good to have you back on the 700 Club. First of all, the Treasury has reversed a rule affecting Social Security recipients regarding those government checks. Can you tell us what's going on?
Yeah, Pat, the Treasury's rule up until about 7 p.m. Eastern time last night was that you had to file a tax return in order to get that stimulus check. And there's about 40 million people in America, Pat, that get Social Security benefits that don't have to file tax returns because they've got no other source of income, and so the Social Security is not taxable. So they were telling us that these people had to file a so-called abbreviated tax return. Well, nobody knows what an abbreviated tax return is. The Treasury reversed himself yesterday and said, no, these Social Security recipients do not have to file a tax return to get their stimulus benefit. It's going to go straight into the bank account where the Social Security benefits are paid. So that's going to make life easy, as I said, for about 40 million, easier for about 40 million people out there that now don't have to file this so-called abbreviated tax return.
Well, that's a great blessing, because the people on Social Security are the ones hurting like crazy, and they need the money. Well, now we've got until July 15th to file or pay our 2019 taxes. Who benefits most from that extension?
Well, there's the 150 million individuals that file tax returns, Pat, are going to benefit from that. There's really two extensions we need to talk about. The filing extension went from April 15th to July 15th. That's for all income tax returns, all right? That does not apply to employment tax returns. So if you're a small business person and you're continuing to operate with your employees, you still have to file your Forms 941 on time. Those are filed quarterly. So this extension we're talking about is for income tax returns only. The other extension, Pat, is a payment extension. Now, normally a filing extension does not extend the deadline for paying the tax, but this one did. So the IRS extended from April 15th to July 15th, the payment requirement as well. So you don't have to pay your income taxes until July 15th. But again, this does not apply to employment taxes, Pat. If you've got an employment tax liability, you still have to pay that on time. However, part of the CARES Act did provide some relief for employment taxes. Those can be continued up through the end of the year without penalties, but they do have to be paid after that. So there is some benefit in the CARES Act for that.
Then, in the macro view, how do you think this is going to affect America? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Pat. You go ahead and finish your question.
No, you've got it. Go ahead.
Well, very simply, Pat, we've got a situation here that is unprecedented in the United States. We've got, as you announced on the program this morning, massive numbers of unemployment requests, like nothing I've ever seen in my lifetime, for sure. I've been in the tax and financial world for 42, 43 years and have never seen anything like this. And I'm sure you haven't. You're a little bit more senior than I am, but I'm sure you've never seen anything like this either, Pat. Here's the good news, though, I think, in all of this, Pat. Certainly we're seeing immediate negative consequences, but the American economy is so resilient and American people are so creative and so resilient that I think this is going to bounce back quickly as soon as we can go back to work. It's not, Pat, this is not like we've had some exterior economic pressure that has crushed the economy. For example, in 2008, we saw the problems with the crisis in the real estate market unemployment that was brought about by questionable lending practices. We don't have any of these, what you might call subterranean factors that are coming to play here. Once this thing is under control, and it will get under control, there's no question in my mind, it's just a question of time. We will get it under control through God's help and God's intervention. I'm just convinced of that. But once that happens, I think it's going to be like throwing a switch, Pat. And I think that you're going to see people back at work, and you're going to see a whole nother element of our economy develop and flourish that we probably didn't imagine before. With all of this remote activity that's been going on, and all these different things that we're doing now because we have to, people are going to find a way to leverage that and create new markets and new industries out of it. I'm just convinced of it.
Well, that's the most optimistic thing. Dan, I appreciate that. Dan Pilla is the author of several books. His most recent is called Dan Pilla's Small Business Tax Guide. And we have a special offer for you. CBN Book can get this book at a discounted price of $24.99. Comes with a free consult with Dan, as well as immediate shipping. Small Business Tax Guide discount for our viewers. Dan, you're a terrific friend. Thank you so much. Dan Pilla.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Pat. Thanks for having me. And God bless you, friend, and stay safe. Huh?
You do, buddy. Thank you. Terry.
I'd like to hear Reason with Hope.
That's right. And this book, he is so intelligent about this whole thing. It's great.
Wonderful.
All right.
Well, up next, a middle school coke dealer, and getting busted didn't set him straight. What finally brought this tough guy to tears? And then later, Pat takes on the issues that matter to you. Beverly asks, if you accept the Lord but don't get baptized, will you still go to heaven? Your questions and honest answers is still ahead, so don't go away.
A drug dealer on steroids, literally steroids. After getting robbed of his cash twice, Caleb McCall knew he needed to bulk up. So Caleb began to inject steroids into his 6'5" frame. And Caleb got very big and very mean very quickly. But then he let his guard down while watching a YouTube video.
This big, hard, angry, drug dealing guy who'd become an addict over the years, whose heart was hard. I was bitter, I was angry, I was mad at my situation. Both of my parents were Christians and spirit-filled believers, but at the tender age of about 5 or 6, they went through a divorce, and that devastated me and it crushed me. I held on to that as a child and kind of grew up with some resentment and bitterness about their divorce. At the age of 13, too, my best friend's brother-in-law come home from prison and introduced us to cocaine. We began selling cocaine for him and using cocaine there in middle school. At the age of 14, I lost my best friend in the world, lost my brother. I was devastated, and I began to try to fill in even more than I already was, that gap, that hole that was missing. I met these guys at 18 years old, and I began working for them. When you're in the drug world, it can be violent. And I was a 19-year-old kid with a bunch of money, flashy cars, and had all this going on. And I was 6'5" and 185, 190 pounds, soaking wet. These 2 robberies happened. One was a .45 caliber pistol was stuck to my chest in broad daylight at Walmart. It was maybe 2 weeks later. Another group of guys, they had jumped me and beat me up in Bedford Manor Apartments and took my drugs. And I remember at that moment, I was thinking, if this is the type of lifestyle that I want to live, if these are the cards that I've been dealt per se, I have to get angry, I have to get bigger, I have to get violent to protect myself and my family and anybody that's associated with me. And I began injecting steroids into my body and got very big, very quick, very mean, very quick. It changed everything about me. I wasn't a violent person up to this point in my life. I was arrogant, full of pride. It was all about me. all the money and the cars and all of those things that used to be a part of my life, and they just kind of dwindled down. I was still selling drugs throughout this whole time, but now my profits and a lot of my money was going into my addiction at this point in my life. And I just remember wanting to get in, just wanting to come into church so I could feel peace. And I come into the church, and actually my first Sunday here, I didn't realize this, but the pastor, he would take me out to lunch periodically, just tell me that all the stuff that I dealt with, it wasn't who I was, and it wasn't who God created me to be. And he just shared the gospel with me and loved on me. And one day at lunch, the pastor actually said, he asked me, so what is it that you do for a living? And I lied to him because I was a drug dealer, so I couldn't tell the pastor the truth, right? And I told him that I did home improvement. And he said, oh, that's great. We're doing some improvements on the church. Why don't you come on by and I'll put you to work. And I was like, oh my goodness, all right, well, let's do it. And so I showed up to the church, and he introduced me to this guy named Todd White. And I listened to him for 2.5 hours. I listened to Todd White's testimony, and I would go around the corner of the church, and I would just begin to break down and weep. I had another violation in a different county over a DUI charge. And I came to Pastor Johnny and I said, is there anything that you can do to help me? And he said, have you ever heard of Teen Challenge? And I said, yes, actually I have. I just made this deal, this bargain with God. And I said, God, if you'll let me get into this program, I promise you I'll give you my life. And I stood in front of 2 judges. I looked both of the judges in the eyes and I said, look, to the one judge, I've been lying to you for months, and the other judge I'd been lying to for years. And I just looked them both in the eyes and I said, I'm a drug dealer who's been a drug addict. Over the last couple of years, I've never asked for help. I've never asked for rehabilitation. I've always just went to jail and did my time. I said, but I'm tired and I'm broken, and I'm asking that you guys would let me go to Teen Challenge in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And both of them signed the order, and they said you to report to that program Monday morning. If you leave or get kicked out, we'll extradite you from Virginia back to Tennessee. I spent 11 months there in Teen Challenge, and I devoured the Word of God. I literally read the cover off of my Bible in the 11 months that I was there. The Bible says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. When you spend time in the Word, you're spending time with Jesus, and Jesus was the only thing that could change a man like me. I am now the young adult pastor at that same church that sent me to Teen Challenge and gave me a chance. I'm now the executive director of Be the Bush Ministries Crisis Center. We're a faith-based drug and alcohol program. We've also opened up a coffee shop called Jehovah Java, where our guys work. We teach them work ethics. Work therapy is a big part of what we do. I was a drug dealer, and I never worked in my life and never worked hard at anything. And while I was in the program, they taught me how to be a man of integrity, faith, and character. When I got born again and I started following Christ, He gave me a purpose. He gave me a calling. All of the mess that I was in turned into a message. All of the tests that I went through turned into a testimony. And He established that. And without Him, I am nothing. But with Him, I can be something.
Isn't that what Jesus said? Without me, you can do nothing. I am the vine, you are the branches. Anyone who is in me will bring forth much fruit. But he that is cut off from me, it's like the branches are taken away and they're burned up. So Caleb said, without him, I can do nothing. And so, folks, right now, we just want to tell you, if you've got a problem, please give our call, 1-800-700-7000, and we'd be delighted to send you a book, anything you need to help you to find what Caleb did, to find Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Terry?
At another round of your questions and honest answers, Carol asks, What is your thought on the theory that we need to stock up for tribulation times with food, etc.? What will Pat say to that? Find out. It's all coming up.
And welcome back to the 700 Club for this CBN News Break. The Gospel Coalition, a fellowship of evangelical churches in the Reformed tradition, is calling for all Christians to take part in a day to fast and pray this Saturday. The organization posted this message on its website. We want to pray to the Lord in faith, trusting in the words of Psalm 10:17. O Lord, you hear the desire of the afflicted. You will strengthen their heart. You will incline your ear. As doctors and nurses toil inside hospitals, communities pray on the outside. Across the nation, people are parking outside hospitals to sing and to pray and flash their lights to encourage hospital staff working around the clock fighting the outbreak. A hospital in Albany, Georgia, thanked Hope City Church for organizing a drive-in prayer vigil, and a medical center in Florida responded to similar support, saying, quote, "We are all on this journey together, and we're committed to the care and improvement of human life." Want to remind you, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Pat and Terry are back with more of today's 700 Club. It's coming up right after this.
Well, when you join the Superbook Club, you get online streaming access to seasons 1 through 5. That's over 55 full-length episodes. Plus, you'll receive our Easter bonus featuring The Last Supper and He is Risen, and 3 copies of our newest episode, Isaiah, all for just $25 when you join the Superbook Club, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you're bringing those stories to children in their languages all over the world. So take advantage of that wonderful opportunity. Email time. You ready?
All right, let's go for it.
Okay,
All right.
this is Beverly, who says, Pat, I was raised that once you accept the Lord Jesus Christ into your heart, then you need to get baptized in water. My question is this: if you accept the Lord but don't get baptized, will you still go to heaven?
Absolutely. You go to heaven because you have received Jesus as your Savior and been forgiven of your sins. The rite of baptism is an act of obedience after you have come to the Lord. And it is a washing away of the old life and the beginning of a new, but it's an act of obedience. You know, the Apostle Paul said, I didn't baptize any except, there was 2 or 3 there that I can remember. But he said, God sent me to preach the gospel. It's the preaching of the gospel that brings you to Jesus, not the other way around, all right?
This is Carol, who says, what is your thought on the theory that we need to stock up for tribulation times with food, etc.?
You know, I've been thinking about this, and I think having a certain amount of emergency in cases of hurricane, cases of power shortage or something like that, it's a good idea to have, you know, some things available like water or, you know, of course I have, you know, an auxiliary generator. We've got generators here. I've got one at another house. I mean, we've got generators all over the place. If the power goes out, we can keep going. But I think the idea of I'm going to stock up a lot of food, how long? I mean, if it's a long period of time, you can't have enough food. But I think a little dried food and these other things, it's very wise. But remember that you can't stock up forever. So we're going to rely on the Lord sooner or later.
Exactly.
And remember, the ravens came and fed the prophets. So God knows how to look after people. But, you know, we're going to have to pray for some miracles along the way, I think, if we have a serious collapse of our economy.
This is Lori, Pat, who says, I'm a 48-year-old woman and I haven't talked to my mother in over 3 years. She is emotionally and mentally abusive. She tells me she should have given me up for adoption. Are there times when God says it's okay not to be in a relationship with your parent?
The Bible says to honor your parents. The word is timeo, which means give weight to them. We give weight to the parent, but if a parent is doing what that woman is doing and say, I'm sorry, I didn't give you up for adoption, I mean, she has sort of abdicated her role as mother. I think you can still give weight to the fact that she's the one that bore you, but I don't think you have to hang around to be abused. I really don't. I think that, she is cutting herself off from you, and you should always hold her in honor and respect and pray that one day that she might open her eyes and that you would always be receptive and always be loving, but you don't have to stand around for that.
This is Bertha, who says Numbers 14:18 says that God, quote, punishes the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation. Does that mean that the children will continue to suffer the consequences for the sins of the parents? But how can that be when the children have nothing to do with the sins of the parents?
If you read Ezekiel, Ezekiel says that very thing. If a father is sinning, the son decides he wants to keep the law of the Lord, the father will bear his sins, the son will not bear his sins. Excuse me. But we've been studying something called epigenetics. And in truth, stuff that you do, whether it's hatred or bitterness or abuse of your body and what have you, not only does it affect the next generation, it changes the DNA composition of who you pass on. And that DNA goes through to your children and down the line. So epigenetics is what the most advanced theory is. You do affect the second and third generation. But God says, I'm going to show mercy to thousands of those who love me. So it's all the way down. God's mercy extends way, way past. And I was thinking today about some of the ancestors that I have who love the Lord, and I'm sure I'm a recipient of some of that grace that was in my family way before I was born. So it does come through, but in a different way. But God does not punish a child for the sins of his father, but if the son lives for the Lord, then he will receive mercy regardless of what his father did. All right?
This is Bob, who says, does a microchip implanted in the body represent the mark of the beast? My wife thinks so and says she would die before letting someone implant one in her body, but I think she's wrong.
Well, it depends on what kind of a microchip it is. Look, I've got in my chest right here a little box. It's called a pacemaker, and it sends the right signal to keep my heart from being in AFib. And it's a nice thing to have. So that ain't the mark of the beast, that is a pacemaker. So, I mean, but the mark of the beast is you're giving your head or your hand, your volition and your action unto this, Antichrist. That's the mark of the beast. And I don't think a little microchip is what we're talking about. All right.
This is Daniel, who says, are Christians still under the 10 Commandments? Do Christians have to obey them?
I have written a book on the 10 Commandments, and I am going to rewrite this book, and I'm going to call it the 10 Fortresses, the 10 Protections. The 10 Commandments were set up to protect people from being maligned, from having their property stolen, from having their life taken away from them. And the biggest thing about it is, I am the Lord your God. Mm-hmm. You'll have no other gods before me. We're always under that one, absolutely. But in terms of not the commandments, but all the dietary laws, Jesus set us free from all those things. We're not under those dietary laws. All right?
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but some good questions. Thank you all very much
were.
for sending them in, and thank you for your answers to those. Well, Mr. Lee walked miles. He was looking for water. The only source he could find was a filthy pond. He tried to boil the water to purify it, and when that didn't work, he asked a witch doctor for help.
Mr. Lee's wish was simple. He wanted fresh water for his family. But all he had access to was dirty water from a pond miles away.
There was always a layer of white ash when we boiled it, and it caused things like kidney failure.
After the Lee's oldest daughter died from drinking the water, the couple knew they had to build a cistern to collect fresh water so their younger daughter, Li Hua, wouldn't die too.
But that meant Mrs. Lee had to leave home and work in the city to help raise money for the cistern. Meanwhile, Mr. Lee stayed home to work on the farm and tried to protect Li Hua from getting sick from the bad water.
I went to a village in the village, and I prayed to the mountain gods for help to keep Li Hua healthy. But she still got sick.
We didn't have much money to go to the doctor, so a lot of times I didn't tell my dad my stomach hurt. I just tied a rope around my stomach to put pressure on it and make the pain go away. It felt like someone was cutting my body with a knife, and everything got fuzzy. I miss my mom so much. I said, "Dad, take me to the hospital. I think I'm going to die."
Li Hua's intestines were blocked like her sister's had been. She got better, but refused to drink the bad water after that. When a local pastor heard about the Lees, he contacted CBN. We built the Lees a cistern and gave them a water filter. Now Mrs. Lee doesn't have to stay in the city to help raise money for a cistern. She's back home with her family.
I still remember the first time I drank the new water. I said, "Dad, is there sugar in here?"
Now we have clean water to drink, and our souls are clean too. Because of Jesus, He touched the hearts of the CBN donors to help strangers like us. So now I believe in Him. Thank you. You changed our lives.
Changing lives is what CBN partners are all about. People who have need that they cannot meet on their own. And then you step right into the midst of it, CBN partners, and you change their lives. For those of you who haven't joined the 700 Club, it's so simple. You call a toll-free number and you make a commitment to pledge 65 cents a day. That works out to $20 a month. That may not seem like much, but when we all link arms together, we really can change lives. So I'm asking you today to go to your phone and make that commitment. The number to call is 1-800-700-7000. Just say you want to join the 700 Club. When you do, our way of saying thank you to you for caring about the needs of others is to send you Pat's book, 10 Laws for Success. You're going to love this. It touches every area of our lives with the principles that God has set out for us. And they are success principles, so we want you to have this. Pat's got another book. It's not out yet, but we want to give you a little preview of it. It's called I Have Walked with the Living God, 90 years of walking with God and how his life has been touched with that. This is 2 chapters out of the book. We'll let you know when the full book is available. But will you call now? Because there are so many people in need. And when you call, it means we can say yes to making a difference for them. So there's the number, 1-800-700-7000. Well, still to come, the secrets of walking with God at a time when you can't even drive to church. Pastor Alan Jackson shares how to have intentional faith. That's next. Well, there's no doubt that we are living in trying times. Schools have closed. Millions are hitting unemployment. The death toll from the coronavirus keeps climbing. It's very easy to lose hope, which is why Pastor Alan Jackson says now is the time for intentional faith.
Alan Jackson is the senior pastor of 15,000-member World Outreach Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. After 39 years of ministry, he's observed a thing or two.
So many people have quietly given up hope that God will make any meaningful difference in their lives. I've observed another group of people, they get to know God in a personal, dynamic, transformational way.
Pastor Jackson says there are reasons why some believers thrive while others don't. In his book, Intentional Faith, he explains how every Christian can have a vibrant walk with God.
Alan Jackson now joins us via Skype. Pastor Jackson, welcome. We're so glad to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be with you this morning.
I want to say you had an op-ed published in Christian Post the other day, and you said prayer is not for crisis use only. Talk about that a little bit. We tend to do that.
Well, we do. I think it's the way we've learned to pray. We tend to relegate prayer to formal religious services or else just a real crisis in our lives. But I imagine prayer to be an invitation to God, so that whenever we offer a prayer, we invite God into the midst of our circumstances or our day or our family or our work. And when we fail to pray, we fail to extend that invitation. So I encourage people to cultivate the habit of just very intentionally inviting God into their day. When you wake up in the morning, Lord, I thank you for a new day. Go with me today. When I pull into the parking lot of work in the morning, Lord, I thank you for a job and a place to work, and go with me today. If you'll extend those invitations to God, you'll find that prayer becomes an integral part of who you are and all of your day.
I know that this is a time where everybody is challenged with how to continue to do business and can't do it the usual way. Churches are being forced to close their doors across the country. What's your church's battle plan?
That's a great choice of words. We've been live streaming services on Saturdays and Sundays and doing daily video updates and creating content for the children. We have so many families with children at home. We've been creating content for them every day. They've been memorizing Psalms, learning hand gestures, and people can share it that way. But then we wrote a battle plan. Literally, we labeled it and we sent it out. And we've been asking people to pray every hour on the hour. And we gave them a set of 7 prayers they could pray, so that if you're awake for a 14-hour day, you can repeat the cycle twice. And so it's not like a snow day where we want to hunker down and endure the season. We want to reposition our lives to cooperate with God so we can hear him and come out of this season in a totally new place with him spiritually.
Your book is entitled Intentional Faith. I want to show folks what the cover looks like, because it's a great message for all of us today. Will you define what you see as intentional faith?
Yes, I will. I think I'm uncomfortable with the way that we have packaged our faith. And I've spent my life in the ministry, so I'm not being critical of anyone. It's just an observation. I think we've told people that if they maintain a weekly appointment with God and you keep those appointments with some regularity, you've really discharged your religious responsibility. And it's left us with a passive attitude. I'm open to anything God has for me. I'll do whatever he wants. But we imagine that God should disrupt our lives. And I believe that's not a very fruitful way to develop a relationship. We have to intend to grow. I wouldn't mind losing 5 pounds. If I woke up tomorrow 5 pounds lighter, I'd be okay with that. But unless I do something about it intentionally, I'm going to get fluffier, not thinner. And if we don't intend to grow spiritually, it's highly improbable we will accomplish it. So we just created some principles, the statements of intent that would enable people to establish momentum towards God. I have found that if we will take the slightest step towards him, God will move to meet us.
Yeah, it's a promise, really, isn't it?
It is.
It is. What holds us back? I think most of us, as believers anyway, when we first come to Christ, we're very intentional because we're very aware of the impact that Christ is having on our lives. Do we just kind of start to take him for granted after a while?
I think we do. And I think, honestly, maybe we haven't even been invited to integrate God into our daily life. We've thought of him as a burden or an intrusion or a limit. And getting to know Jesus will lift the limits from your life, not add to them. He is not a diminishing force. He is an unlimiting friend. And helping people understand that, I find people are very willing to move towards it. We walked through these 10 statements of intent with our congregation for a couple of years, and I was so amazed at the outcomes. It's what caused us to put them into the book. And then we created 100 Days of Faith video. I'll join with you. They're 3 or 4 minute videos. We'll drop them in your inbox every day, and I'll actually walk you through this, because I think people want to do well. They just don't know how. I agree. You invite your readers to commit to 100 days of intentional faith. What does that look like? Well, it's not as intrusive as you might imagine. We're going to ask them over a period of 100 days to read the New Testament with us. And I'll step in through video in the morning and kind of help you unpack it so you didn't get hung up on the big words or the names of the cities that you don't know. But along with that, we're going to introduce some daily disciplines. They're really classic spiritual disciplines. We've just put them into some contemporary language and implementation so that we don't get intimidated by the history of it. Being a follower of Jesus is not a new thing in the 21st century. In fact, it's been proven over time. We're just trying to reintroduce people to some classic expressions of our faith. What do you expect the outcome for them to be? I think it is life-changing. It will open their heart to the imagination of a God. Most of us have to wait for a crisis. And the purpose of this book is you don't want to have to wait till you're in a crisis. When I was 7, my mom was diagnosed with cancer and told she had 6 months to live. And we were to church every week, but we didn't know God. And on the way to Mayo Clinic for major surgery, she said, if there is a God, let me know the truth before I die. And when they did the preliminary exam, they had all the tumors and the masses in the films, but the doctors couldn't find them any longer. Wow. And a few weeks later, Jesus stepped in and said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And my parents became Christ followers, and it changed our lives. And we want to help people gain that momentum without having to walk through that crisis.
Well, Alan, the book is wonderful. I found it very encouraging. It's called Intentional Faith, Aligning Your Life with the Heart of God. Thanks for being with us. Pat, over to you.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks. Well, today's Power Minute is from Psalms. Quote, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. Bye-bye.